Venezuela becomes now a center of the geopolitical struggle between US, Europe, China, Russia, and it's now in the focus of the international politics. And I think it's very important that the tradition of installing coups in different countries, especially by the US, should be stopped.
Op 2 mei organiseren de Duitse geestverwanten van de SP, Die Linke, in Aken een openbare bijeenkomst waar Andrej Hunko een inleiding hield. Deze Bundestag, parlementariër voor Die Linke, was eerder dit jaar op bezoek in Venezuela. Hij geeft zijn kijk op de recente couppoging, de toekomst van Venezuela en internationale solidariteit. Oh well. So for people who don't know you, which is probably the majority of our listeners, could you introduce yourself? Who are you and what do you do for Die Linke?
My name is Andrej Hunko. I'm here from Aachen. It's Aken in Netherlands, at the border to the Netherlands, and I'm member of the parliament for Die Linke, the left-wing party, and I'm mainly dealing with European and international politics. And now I was last week for all in all, it was 11 days. I was in Venezuela, speaking there with government, with opposition, with different actors, with human rights organizations, critical Chavists, with international humanitarian organizations like Red Cross, to get a picture of the situation in the country, and as well a bit to counter the official picture which is presented here in Germany and probably the same in Netherlands by the mass media.
Right. So, what made you go to Venezuela? What was the reason?
The initial point was after the 23rd of January, when the parliamentary president Guaido called himself the president of the country and was directly recognized by the US president or the USA and other countries, and then after some days as well by a lot of European countries like Germany, like Netherlands. And I thought this is now a huge challenge, a very strange situation where it could be and could lead to a new regime change war, which we have seen in the last years in other places of the world, in Syria, in Libya, in Ukraine, and I was really concerned about this, and was some new movement rising up in Germany to counter this position, to oppose the position of our government supporting this way. So I thought it would be important to go there, because this is very often in these situations, these countries, they are created as no-go areas where it's very difficult for politicians or for journalists or interested citizens to go there, to have trying to get a broad picture of the situation. So everybody is dependent on propaganda, and there's a lot of propaganda at the moment. So this was my main motive to go there, and as well to bring over the people in Venezuela our solidarity against military threat and against economic sanctions.
Right. So the German government is for the Guaido supposed government, How was your trip to Venezuela received in Germany? Because, well, you became somewhat of a celebrity in the media because of it. Could you perhaps elaborate on that?
Yeah, first I didn't had on my agenda to meet Maduro and Guaido, but during my stay it became possible to meet them as well, both. And the meeting with Maduro was treated as a huge scandal. Was my picture with Maduro was on every newspaper and was very heavy critics by the government parties. And this as well that because our foreign minister now he went to Brazil and Colombia some days later, and he met with the extreme right-wing president of Brazil, Bolsonaro, and in Colombia he met the radical wing of the opposition in Venezuela, but he didn't go to Venezuela itself and to have a own, because this is a big issue at the moment, what's happening in Venezuela, but he didn't go there. And so it was some kind of countering what I did to what he did, and this touched a lot of German foreign policy interests because they have their line, and I destroyed their line or made it some counter line on the question. So I was heavily attacked by the mainstream media, but then it became more and more that people said, well, but this Hunko, he met with both sides. What is so wrong with it to see both sides? And what is so wrong to call for dialogue, for a peaceful solution? Because even in the coup, during the coup on 30th of April, 2 days ago, during the coup, our foreign minister declared his support for Guaido. And I think this is a very, very bad line. And this is, as well, a lot of people in Germany think that is not what our foreign minister should do.
So you just mentioned the coup attempt of a few days ago, which, well, laughably failed in hindsight. But this, that doesn't really settle the crisis, does it?
No, it totally failed. It was a lot of fake news during the coup because it was given the impression that Guaido took the military airport in Caracas, and that a lot of parts of the military went over to him and recognized him as a president, which was not true. And now, after the failure of this coup, he's still walking around freely in Venezuela. I think in most countries of the world, he would be in prison and there would be a trial because this is not so nice for states that somebody says, I am now the president, so no state in the world would accept this. But it's the problem is that there is a lot of threat on Venezuela, military threat by US. Yesterday, US Foreign Minister Pompeo said that there are military options on the table. So I think the government of Venezuela is not trying to provoke this situation, and they are careful of dealing with Guaido. So now I'm very worried that because the general situation is the same, the country is very polarized. There are a lot of people supporting the government, but a lot of people supporting the opposition as well. And in the last weeks and months, there were a lot of big demonstrations, but not violent demonstrations. And my great concern is that there could be a change in the strategy of the opposition to have a more violent, like the Garimbas 2 years ago, to have more violent and to provoke situations which could lead to military interventions from the Colombian side by paramilitaries from Colombia, by supported by the US or directly by special US forces or even by Blackwater, for example, private military companies. So I think we should really pressure our governments not to follow this line, to have a more neutral and dialogue-orientated stance on the situation in Venezuela, and not follow this line now presented by the US.
So, I think that your call to support the Maduro government in this case against imperialism would be quite well supported by much of the left. But on the other side, is the Maduro government, he was preceded, of course, by Hugo Chavez. Is that a model of socialism, or how do you view that government? How do you view the Venezuelan state, the Bolivarian revolution? Is it a failure, or is it somewhere in between, or is it completely sabotaged by the US? So how do you view that?
Well, I think there are a lot of elements of the Bolivarian revolution. They have to be saved. They should be defended, especially the participation of the very poor people and the dealing with the very poor people, the education for the very poor people. There was a lot of money was used for building houses, for educating, for the poor people, I think, and giving them some kind of consciousness. The Bolivarian constitution, the Venezuelan constitution now, has a lot of very direct democratic elements, and trying to involve the people from the barrios. They were outside of politics before, but it still keeps to be my personal view, it keeps to be a mainly capitalist society. Most of companies are private. The dependence on the oil is maybe the capitalist raw material. It's extremely high, and there was a failure to use the good years of Chavism, in my view, to get rid of this extractivist economy, rentist economy, to build some more diverse economy, to break the dependence on the oil. But this was not. Chavez tried to do it, but he couldn't succeed in this. So a lot of problems we see today in Venezuela are more linked to the history of the oil dependence than on bad decisions by Chavist governments. But of course, there's as well a lot of corruption there. There's a lot of bad, not good economic dealing with the issues. There was far too few investment in sustainable structures, and this is now bitterly coming up to the surface.
You could, of course, question how the good years that you refer to were from 2002-ish to 2008-ish. So what can you do in 5 to 6 years? You can have a discussion about that, of course.
Of course, this was the best years, I would say, but it was still, you had, but I think, well, I don't feel expert enough to go deeper in this question, because I never dealt a lot with Venezuela, because I, of course, like most of the leftists, I followed the coup in 2002, and saw the film Inside the Coup by the Irish camera team there. It was a brilliant film. And I had some general sympathies with the idea of creating a socialism in the 21st century. but I never went deeper to the economic questions. This was not my first dealing with. But now Venezuela becomes now a center of the geopolitical struggle between US, Europe, China, Russia. And it's now in the focus of the international politics, and I think it's very important that the tradition of installing coups in different countries, especially by the US, should be stopped. And I'm very much hoping that this will be a failure, and that the US foreign policy is giving up this line of trying to overthrow. Yes, there are some debates in the left wing of the Democratic Party around Bernie Sanders movement, and I think I would very much love that this way of doing international politics, ignoring international law, bringing in violent forces, trying to destabilize countries which are not in line with US international politics. I think this politics has to be stopped.
Right, and well, the US has been trying to topple the Bolivarian regime for the last 20 years now. So, if they are going to stop, I'm a bit pessimistic about that.
Of course, I don't want to create illusions about this. And of course, Venezuela was always not dealt friendly by the US, and there were a lot of maneuvers to topple the government, especially 2002 with the coup. But it failed, but I think now, since 1 or 2 years, something even more aggressive, more on the top agenda to topple this government. And I think I hope it will be a failure like 2002.
Venezuela is of course also somewhat of a mirror for us, the left in Europe, to see what can or what will or what may happen if we take power, so to speak. To close the interview with that, the European elections are later this month. What is your view? What is your view regarding the other left parties in Europe? Should we be working together on the case of Venezuela? Should we work together on the case of socialism in Europe? What is your view on that?
Well, of course, we should work together. We should work together on Venezuela. There were very ugly resolutions in the European Parliament, accepted by the majority of the European Parliament. Extremely aggressive resolutions, including the recognition of Guaido as the only legitimate president in Venezuela. This was unanimously rejected by the left group, our left group there, the GUE-NGL, with our party, with the Socialist Party of the Netherlands, and a lot of other leftist parties in Europe. And this is very important, that there is a different voice in the European Parliament, of course. But of course, we are not there only for Venezuela. We want to have a total different Europe. We don't want to have a European Union which is mainly functioning in the interest of the big companies, like it is in the moment. Look for the decision by the European Court in Luxembourg some days ago on CETA, on the free trade agreement with Canada, where they accepted these extraordinary courts. They have these special courts for investment, to protect investors. And this is a very worrying development, because this opens the way to some kind of special courts for the companies, and this was in line with, according to the Luxembourg court, was in line with European treaties. So there's a lot of problems there, and we don't want to have this kind of Europe. We want to have a European cooperation, European integration, serving for the interests of the working class and the poor and the ordinary people.
A democratic and social Europe. Huh?
A democratic, a social, a peaceful, because now there's a lot of armament processes going on in the European Union, and ecological Europe as well. We still are linked based on Euratom and not on. We are calling, for example, for getting rid of this and having instead agency for ecological transformation, social ecological transformation, and a lot of things we need to do on the level. But of course, we need some kind of European as part of international cooperation.
So to close off, do you want to call on for something, or do you want to refer comrades are listening to this podcast to any website or any source? Or
well, if you're living in Europe and EU countries, it's, I think, despite the fact that there is reasonable critics on the European Parliament, how it works. And I think it's very important to go there to vote for left-wing parties, for example, the Socialist Party in the Netherlands, because the problem we have is that the EU elections traditionally the more of the working class areas, they are not going to the elections, or with much less turnout. And traditionally, the more upper classes, they go to vote, and then you have a European Parliament which is very much going to the wrong direction. So it's part of defending your own interests to go there, and I think we should prevent a further right-wing shift on the European level, but we have to strengthen left-wing social forces to tackle as well the way the European Union is working at the moment.
Andrej, thank you. Have a great campaign for the European Parliament, and of course, good luck with all the solidarity work you're doing with Venezuela.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Volgende week, een weekje eerder dan gepland, hebben we een aflevering zonder mij. Maar met de nieuwe voorzitter van Rood, Arno van der Veen. Ik ben benieuwd.